Okay, thank you very much. I'd like to welcome a guest today, Christopher Prebenson, who's the director of NATO's Office of Information and Press, is spending the day right here behind you in the building, looking at our operation to see what he can learn about it, but actually we're trying to squeeze information out of him to see what we can learn about NATO's press operation. Welcome. With that, I'll take your questions. Yes, Bradley.
Sources say you may have something to say on whether any contingency operations are being affected by the stand down of the F-14.
I can tell you that I'm not aware that any contingency operations are being affected. I think that General Estes described very well the situation with the George Washington. There is one, I believe, small exception to the stand down, and that is that the planes on the F-14s on the America will be allowed to fly off as they usually do as it approaches home port. It's on its way back now. I'd like to correct one statement that was made. Mark, I think you referred to this as a grounding. There's a difference between a grounding and a stand down. These planes haven't been planes are grounded when we have a specific indication that something's wrong. A rotor blade, a hairline crack in a wing, the ejection seat might be malfunctioning in a class of planes. And when we know that, then we ground the entire class of planes until that specific item is fixed. A stand down, by contrast, is different. We do not know what has caused these 3 crashes this year with the F-14s. The goal of the stand down is to make everybody take some time out to look at everything in connection with flying F-14s, training, maintenance, equipment, etc., to see if we can find any common threads. And if we knew what the problem was, as you do know during a grounding, we would take the specific action required to correct it. The Navy does not know, and it wants to find out. So with that definitional distinction, I'll move on. Otto.
The Secretary was briefed by Admiral Borda Tuesday on this, on the one before this latest one. Did he indicate that any preference, course of action? Did he recommend a stand down or anything like that?
He did not recommend a stand down, and that's a good point. Let me take that and explain to you what happened today. When this accident occurred in the Gulf, Admiral Borda came to the Deputy Secretary. The Secretary was tied up doing something else, and informed the Deputy Secretary, 1, of the accident, and 2, of his decision, Admiral Borda's decision, to stand down the entire F-14 fleet for 72 hours. So this was a decision made by the Navy and presented to Deputy Secretary White. He accepted the decision, obviously, thinks it's the right thing to do, but this is a Navy decision to solve a Navy problem.
Ken, just a short time ago, you stood at the podium there and told us that there was no indication that the F-14 was any less safe than other planes. Does this latest accident change that assessment in any way?
What the Navy is trying to find out is what caused these crashes. General Estes pointed out that accidents happen in high-performance aviation. They happen in all aviation. Over the last 20 years, there's been a nearly constant decline in military aviation accident rates. There was a piece in Navy Times this week, I believe, detailing that, pointing out that there's been a very steady decline. There are blips on the charts, on the accident graphs, that sometimes are unexplained, and we have some charts we'll hand out to you, but this is a chart of the Class A mishap rate for F-14s, and just, I don't know whether you can see this, but it started out very high when the F-14s were introduced into the fleet, came down, and you can see that there was actually a very steady decline. Then there were a couple of blips. There was a blip here, started down again. There was a blip here. You know that there were 11 F-14 mishaps in 1 year. It blipped up there. Why? Nobody was able to explain why there were 11 mishaps in 1 year when there had been a much smaller number the year before and a much smaller number in the succeeding year. Started down again, then it started up again. This is a mystery, and this is what the Navy's trying to determine. I have said for the 3 times that I've dealt with this topic recently that this is a matter of extremely serious concern to the Navy and to the Department of Defense, and we're doing everything we can to figure it out. But I think that what this graph that you can pick up shows is that there are ups and downs in this pattern, and these ups and downs are sometimes unexplained. What we're trying to do is find an explanation. Yes.
If I'm not mistaken, I think there were well over 300 of these F-14s in service. And if it turned out there is a problem with the class, what would that do to U.S. air defense to have that many planes having serious problems?
Well, most problems are fixable. So I think that if we were able to find that there was a problem affecting the entire class, we would find a solution to that problem. So I wouldn't leap to the conclusion that a problem would require a withdrawal of all these planes. As you know, the planes have been in service for a long while. They are the F-14As are supposed to be phased out of the Navy by 2004, and the Bs and Ds will be phased out later, I think, by 2010. But the Air Force and the Navy fly many old planes. We have very, very demanding maintenance practices that are designed to keep planes at the peak of their performance. And one of the things we'll look at here, one of the things the Navy will look at, is the way these planes are maintained. We're looking at everything. Yes?
Ken, of those blips that you identified, were there any that you can say that it was known what caused a particular jump? Are there cases where a specific
The Navy informs me that they have not been able to determine that. They have not been able to find a common thread. Remember, you're dealing here with 3 types of F-14s. You've got A's, B's, and D's, and they're different planes. The A's have different engines from the B's and D's, so they have different flight characteristics. There's different training for the planes. It's not good to lump them all together. They have to be looked at separately. We are looking at them separately and together because, of course, there could be a common cause. We just don't know.
So even though the blip appears as a statistical jump, it's not necessarily an amalgamation of a particular problem.
The Navy has not been able to find a common thread to these accidents. Yes.
Is the stand down being limited to 72 hours because of some pressure to keep these planes in service for use in the Adriatic or elsewhere?
No. The stand down will serve 2 purposes. It gives everybody a chance, and the Navy talked about some of the studies that will take place during this 72 hours. It gives the Navy a chance to sort of pull together as much information as possible, look for interconnections, compare, contrast the accidents that have occurred recently with accidents that occurred in the past to see if there are any common threads. It also serves, I think, as a warning, as a period of reflection for the whole F-14 community. It gives them time to sit down and talk to one another, times that they might not have during operations and training, to sit down and to sort of re-plow everything they've learned. Re-plow, have the maintenance people, the pilots, the mission taskers, etc., the contractors to sit down and say, is there something we're missing? It allows a type of detailed discussion that they don't have time for ordinarily. It would be easy to say we should have a stand down for a specific period of time if we knew what was causing these problems. But without knowing that, it's a little hard to know what the optimum time for a stand down is. Yes?
72 hours still doesn't seem to be a very long time. Is there a chance that that period could be extended, or that all depends on?
There's a chance that it could be extended. I suppose there's also a chance that there could be limited flight operations allowed within the 72 hours for certain types of planes. Remember, one of the things that pilots have to do is fly regularly to stay tuned, to stay ready. And the longer pilots go without flying, the greater risk they face when they get back into the cockpit. So you don't want to stand down pilots for too long. Yes.
How important are the F-14? What percentage are they of our fighter aircraft fleet?
Oh, I can't give it to you, and ask the Navy for that, but a quick contrast I can give you is that there are about 1,200 F-18s, and there are a little over 300 F-14s. So that gives you some order of magnitude. I gave this precise numbers last time. There are 211 F-14As, 47 F-14Ds, and 79 F-14Bs. Yes.
Could you comment on these reports that Rodko Mladic has targeted U.S. troops for attack or abduction?
I think General Estes handled it. If you want me to repeat what General Estes said, I'll be glad to. But
I just wonder if you could provide, I mean, how seriously is this threat being taken? Is anything being...
First of all, we take all threats seriously. And the defensive posture, the security posture of our forces in Bosnia has been very high from the beginning, and it remains high. Second, all threats are passed down to the lowest command level as fast as possible, so that the commanders in the field can make any adjustments they feel are necessary in light of the threat and in light of their current operational profile. Third, Ratko Mladic makes a lot of threats. We see no evidence that he has attempted to carry through on this threat. He is an indicted war criminal. He lives by bluster and force, and he has for a long time. We expect threats from him. We've gotten many threats from him. We take the threat seriously, but I think these threats should be put in context. He's a threatening character, and he not only is threatening because of the military force he has controlled, but also because he makes threats. This, so far, is a threat in which we've seen no evidence he's tried to deliver. But we are ready. We are prepared, and we're vigilant.
And I'm sorry.
Yes.
Do you believe the threat was made, or you have no evidence to suggest the threat was made?
We've seen reports that he made this threat. We take reports of threats seriously. Need I say more? I mean, a report of a threat is a report of a threat. We respond to them.
Came out of his mouth at some point.
We have seen reports of the threat. Look, this is a dangerous business. These people are in a dangerous place. They're paid to be vigilant. That's how they stay alive. That's why we pass these threats, reports on to them so they can respond to them in the best possible way. I don't think this is enormously complex.
Fair enough, but this may be an inaccurate report that he made.
It could well be an inaccurate report. We don't think we have the luxury of waiting to decide whether reports are accurate or inaccurate. Our job, and we work very hard, you've had briefings on background from senior intelligence officials. You've had a briefing from Dr. Kaminsky on this. We've worked extremely hard in this operation to get intelligence down to the lowest level as fast as possible. And part of that means that you don't spend 3 weeks deciding whether reports are accurate. If you get some information you think is useful, you get it down to the people who can act on it. And that's what we've tried to do. And we have succeeded in this case. Yes, Otto.
Different subject. I know this building likes to stay out of politics, but there's calls out there on the campaign trail now for use of the military to block off the borders.
I'm sorry, to do what?
To block the borders, replace the one proposal would be to replace the INS Border Patrol people with armed troops. Folks have expressed your views on those kind of proposals in the past. Is any change in the Pentagon's reluctance to do that kind of duty?
Well, it'd be sort of the ultimate mission creep, I guess, in a way, wouldn't it? Without commenting specifically on proposals that have been floated about the border, I don't think we need a new bureaucracy to deal with drug and border issues. I think we have government agencies that are very skillful at dealing with those challenges. I think that there's been a huge improvement in monitoring the U.S. southern border over the last several years during the Clinton administration. The number of illegals seized is way up, and you should check with the Justice Department about this, but I think also drug seizures are way up. So we are making considerable progress with our current agencies and trained personnel.
Is this the view that, something like that, Border Patrol duties be considered distraction from your prime duty of preparing to fight our wars?
The military operates under a very clear law called the Posse Comitatus law that keeps it out of domestic law enforcement operations, except in very limited and clearly defined support functions. This has worked very well in the United States. I have no reason to believe we should change it. I don't think the Department believes we should change this. I think we feel strongly that there should be a separation between what the military does to protect the United States from foreign aggressors, from foreign threats on the one hand, and what domestic law enforcement agencies do to deal with internal issues. Jamie.
This subject, as long as we're on arcane matters, I just thought I would ask you, in the defense authorization bill, apparently there was a sort of little noticed or not much attention paid to a provision about missing service members, which requires the Pentagon to do certain things to keep cases of missing service members active and to require periodic reviews of their cases. Can you just tell us what the Department's position was on that particular provision?
The Department believes, and the Department has told Congress, that this provision, which, as you correctly point out, was included in the Defense Authorization Bill. We believe that this provision would hinder battlefield operations. The Department also has told Congress that it would prolong the anguish of family members of missing persons, and it would impose excessive financial and administrative burdens on the Defense Department. And the senior military leaders have told Congress that they believe this provision is unnecessary.
Well, similar to other provisions of the bill that the administration doesn't agree with, will there be an attempt to seek legislative redress for that provision?
I can't answer your question on that. We'll try to find out. There are many issues in this bill that with which we disagree, and we will be forced to accept some of them. Others, such as the HIV positive provision, we are attempting to change. I want to point out we succeeded in changing the most objectionable provisions in the bill between the time it was vetoed, it was first vetoed, and the time it was signed into law by President Clinton. Yes.
Back on the F-14, in the Kara Hulk accident report, there were a lot of references by pilots and I think some commanders to the engine being unforgiving. Has the Navy already determined at some point that the engine is not a problem on the F-14?
I don't want to comment on the results of any of the 3 most recent crash investigations because the investigations aren't complete. It's up to the Navy to comment on those when they're finished. All pilots are trained to fly the planes within the parameters of the performance parameters of that particular plane, and the performance parameters are reflect the engine, they reflect the general design of the plane, the responsiveness of the controls, etc. But the specifics will come out when the Navy completes its investigations.
Some,
Yes.
all three of the planes in the most recent crashes have been based on the West Coast. Is there some difference in the training regimen that is followed by Pacific Air or the maintenance regimen on these airplanes that is being focused on?
The Navy does not believe the fact that these were stationed on the West Coast has any relevance to the crashes, but that's certainly one of the things that groups can look at when they have the time during a stand down to sit down and rack their brains for any sort of explanation, no matter how seemingly far-fetched, that might lead to a conclusion about why these crashes occurred. Yes?
Do you have anything about the Solana visit to the building to see Perry and other officials here?
I'm sorry, whose visit?
The Secretary General of the NATO. Do you have anything about that? About
The Secretary
meetings?
General of NATO?
Anything about the meetings he had to take here?
I'm afraid I haven't gotten a report of the meetings, but I can tell you that I think if you read the statement after the meeting at the White House yesterday, you would find many of the same provisions discussed here. How the Bosnia operation is going is certainly high on the list. Questions about NATO adaptation, NATO expansion, partnership for peace are all issues. Another issue clearly would be the relationship of France to NATO. The broad menu of important NATO issues, all up for discussion. Yes, Ed.
Again, on the F-14, could you simply tell us what you know about what happened this morning? I mean, what type of aircraft it was, what aircraft carrier it was attached to, what time this occurred, and whatever you might know about the crash itself?
The Navy will answer all those questions, but in short, it was an F-14A flying off the Nimitz. I don't know the exact. Have you seen the release they put out? Well, I recommend you get a copy of that release and just ask them the answers to those questions. They'll give them to you. What they can't do right now is, I don't believe they know enough to be able to say why the plane crashed at this stage.
Copies are available at the Navy News Desk.
Some in Congress have criticized Secretary Perry's recent restructuring of the ballistic missile defense program, saying that it's in fact a cut or a reduction or a slowdown in the deployment of missile defenses, and it flouts the will of Congress. Could you comment on that?
Secretary Perry has made it clear many times in testimony to Congress and discussions with the press and discussions with the general public that he has no higher obligation as Secretary of Defense than the protection of the United States forces and United States territory. And we believe that the program we're working on addresses the threats we face in a timely and an effective way.
But does it violate the intent of Congress in terms of specific mandates of deployments of systems?
In many ways, it responds to congressional concerns about developing an effective theater ballistic missile defense program and eventually positioning ourselves to build a national missile defense program if we decide it's warranted. That's what the review was designed to do. It was in response to congressional concerns. It was a response to the desires of the military leadership to frame that program as part of our broader defense procurement obligations and challenges. And it also was an effort to go back and look at the intelligence and the threats we face and to size the program to fit those threats. And we think that the review did all those things. In terms of the specific dates and goals established in the Defense Authorization Bill, I think it's worth pointing out that there are a number of court cases and administrative conclusions that it's difficult for a Congress in this year to bind certain administrative actions into the future, particularly when those actions are dependent on future funding levels which have not yet been determined. And many of the goals laid out by Congress would require a level of funding in the future higher than we anticipate getting. Now, if that changes, the schedule could change, but we think that the program fits the threat as we see it now and as we see it evolving in the future.
Are we required to keep asking questions because Charlie Ollinger isn't here?
No, John Roper just took over Charlie's